Hello, welcome everyone. This is Dr. Anayeli Lopez, and I will be talking to you about Chapter 3, the biological person. But I will specifically be talking to you about the different approaches that we should use as social workers to better understand the biology of a person and how different factors can influence the biology of a person. So the textbook talks about taking an integrated approach. So what does that mean? It means that we need to be aware of how the biology of a person plays an important role in affecting human behavior. However, the body and its surroundings are a continuous environment which is made up of all the conditions that affect an individual. So um, so both the interior and exterior environments have an impact on um, the biology and um, the mental health well-being of a person. So the interior includes the organs, genetics, and psychological structures. And the exterior includes the non-organic conditions that are not contained within the body. So this includes, for example, how poverty, violence, discrimination, um, different things happening in someone's surroundings has an impact on someone's both biology and human behavior. So that's what an integrated approach means. We need to be aware of how different interior and exterior factors impacts the well-being of our clients. And similarly, a systems framework also takes into consideration how factors within an individual and also systems outside the individual have an impact on the well-being of our clients. So, so previously we talked about Bronfenbrenner's ecological systems theory. So this is referring back to that. So as you remember, if your client is in the middle, it is surrounded by different systems that impact the client. And this includes the interaction that they have, both positive and negatives, with systems around them, including, for example, the school system, um, the workplace, their neighborhood. So it does have an impact. For example, if they live in a neighborhood where there is a lot of violence, for example, and I will be talking about that a little bit more later on. And the workplace, the the workplace provide flexibility for the parents if if the client is a child. Um, what are the working conditions? So all of those have an impact on the well-being of an individual. So the constructivist perspective, um, what this means is that conditions or of an individual are largely defined by its meaning um, from different views, including the political, social, cultural, technological, economic, different types of environment. So what this means is that the experience of a person um, with a given illness or condition is understood through the shared cultural understanding of the expected role a person with that condition has. So for example, So if a person has a disabling medical condition like paralysis or low vision, how is that looked upon by society? Um, so the constructivist view allows us to see um, perhaps the what are the expectations of people. um, are we accommodating, for example, in the workplace, in the school, at the university? um, are we accommodating or not? How does that person experience their condition in different places? um, do they experience discrimination? So those are things that we need to keep in mind as we work with individuals who have an illness or a medical condition. How do they experience their illness or condition, given that there are different views on people with that medical condition from society? So again, there are different factors that lead to poor health outcomes in the body, including low income, low education, unsanitary housing, inadequate healthcare, unstable employment, unsafe physical environments. So, if we think, for example, about migrant workers working in the fields, and they may be dealing with different chemicals that may impact um, their health, and they may feel vulnerable about speaking up about those conditions. And most recently, with the COVID-19 pandemic, um, what we heard is that, for example, with migrant workers, and not just them, but other vulnerable populations, that they were experiencing some of the worst consequences because they were considered essential workers. Yet they were not protected in terms of um, receiving adequate equipment to protect them from COVID. Um, and yeah, they were expected to work. And if they became sick with COVID, they also had the least access to healthcare. Um, so again, this is how we see how the environment impacts individuals with different vulnerabilities. So also another factor that impacts the biological or physical well-being of a person is the differential access to healthcare. So as many people don't have access to health insurance. There may be different reasons. Perhaps it's not offered in their workplace, or perhaps they do not they're not documented in this country, so that will also have an impact on not being able to have access to healthcare. And as we think about other reasons, there are other issues related to access to healthcare, including not having the time to even access healthcare. So again, working long hours, and if they take the day off, um, they will not be able to afford taking that day off because they're depending on making ends meet with the low salary that they're making. Another one is transportation availability and cost. And we see this a lot in New Mexico, for example, especially with populations living in rural areas. Um, we have heard that it is very difficult for them to access services that are not near their communities, again because they may not have the transportation. If and if we're talking about immigrants, they may not even have a driver's license, um, and they may be afraid of encountering different checkpoints and border patrol um, uh, surrounding their communities. And another one is scheduling flexibility. So again, due to their work schedule, to their inflexible work schedules, they may not be able to even schedule a preventive doctor's appointment. They may wait until it is an emergency. And even a sense of efficacy and control, feeling that it doesn't matter if if they visit the doctor or not, that they will still experience health problems anyways. So again, environmental um, exposures also impacts the biological and physical well-being of a person, um, and they include environmental hazards, including air, water, and noise pollution, hazardous waste, and toxins that individuals um, of higher socioeconomic status may may produce, affecting those from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. Health behaviors. So this includes statistics that show that lower socioeconomic individuals are more likely to smoke, have higher levels of physical inactivity, and need an unhealthy diet. So this does not mean that we are stereotyping, oh, this is who people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds are. Um, it is referring more, I believe, to going back to the environmental and systems factors that they experience. So, for example, why are they more likely to eat unhealthy? Well, maybe because in those neighborhoods, um, they're less likely to have access to grocery stores that offer a variety of food items that are healthy. So I used to live in Cleveland, Ohio, while I completed my MSW, and I know that that's something that I learned when I was living there. That especially in those inner city neighborhoods, um, people did not have access again to grocery stores with healthy food options. They had the small convenience stores that offer more junk food um, and not the healthy options. Also, why are they less likely to have or more likely to have higher levels of physical inactivity? And it is not because they're lazy, but because maybe they don't have, again, recreational facilities. They don't have parks. They don't have um, walking trails. They don't have those areas or facilities available so that they can exercise. Or they may not even have the time because they work very long hours to even make ends meet. And smoke, and again, it does not mean that it is just because they have bad habits, but perhaps they're experiencing other outside factors, and they use these behaviors as coping mechanisms to help individuals deal with their ongoing problems. So, in my case, that I have experience with immigrant populations, they're dealing with acculturative stress of being able to adapt to live in a new country, not speaking the language and often feeling discriminated against, or with undocumented populations uh, feeling that they are of, often, they're afraid. They often have to hide, so that they're not identified and caught. And they may not have a supportive system in the community. So they may use, again, these negative coping mechanisms such as smoking or drinking, instead of dealing with those problems in a positive way. So, but that's why, as we think about different programs, we need to think about how different interventions can prevent those type of negative health behaviors. I know that when I was living in Indiana, um, a community organization started a program called Bienvenidos, or Welcome. And what it involved is that people were put into different um, groups, or therapy groups or coping groups, and people were able to share about their immigration experience and about the different struggles that they were facing, so that they would not feel lonely in their struggle and their adaptation process. And also, as part of that, they connected them with different organizations so that they could do community service and they could become integrated into the community. So the purpose of that program was, again, to help them develop a sense of belonging, to make them feel that there are others going through the same struggle, and there are people in the community who um, will be supportive. And they also were introduced to different resources in the community. So again, they were introduced to different ways of coping with their problems. So we need to think about those things as we think about interventions for different populations. So exposure to stress. We know that long-term exposure can have multiple negative health effects on a person. Um, and research has shown that chronic stress has been linked to adverse health outcomes, including hypertension, susceptibility to infection, build up fat in blood vessels in the abdomen, and brain cell atrophy. And stress also has been linked to premature aging at the cellular level. And research has shown that chronic stress increases as economic class decreases. So again, especially people living in low socioeconomic conditions, and also people of color tend to experience higher levels of stress, including, again, being exposed to different negative environmental factors, and also to being exposed to this oppression and discrimination, which has an impact on their biological or physical well-being. And again, especially among um, people of color, African Americans, Latinos, and people of different ethnic backgrounds. So again, it is not surprising, individuals living in low-income neighborhoods have been found to have poor health than their middle and high-income counterparts. And this is true whether or not an individual is poor. And again, because it has to do with the access to different resources and facilities. So they may not have access to, again, as we see here in the picture, um, if you live in a wealthy neighborhood, you may feel safer walking, jogging, and there may be more areas that are accessible to exercises, walking, jogging. Um, you may have more access to parks, to grocery stores that offer a variety of healthy foods. Um, and again, You may not be dealing with the stress of living in a violent neighborhood. So again, it is no surprise that individuals living in low-income neighborhoods have been found to have poorer health. So what are the implications for social work practice? So again, we need to have or develop this working knowledge of um, how our interior environmental systems interconnect with our human behavior, and in the assessments and interventions that we conduct on our clients, we need to recognize how their interior health and illnesses are influenced by exterior factors, including the environment, other social, political, and cultural economic context. We need to recognize again that the exterior environmental meaning um, has a consequence on health and illness. And it may not just have an impact on our physical health, but also on our socio emotional response and coping to health and illness. So again, we need to keep in mind as we assess and conduct assessments and interventions, we need to look and analyze how behavior affects the biological functioning of a person, and also how the biological functioning affects behavior of a person. We also need to evaluate the influences of people's health status on their cognitive performance, emotional comfort, and overall well-being. Um, and again, just how their health status is affecting other people uh, or other people in the person's exterior environment. So how are not just them but their family members coping with their illness? What support are they providing, but also how it is affecting them? Um, so again, we just need to keep this in mind as we work with people in the medical arena. And finally, later on this semester, you will be conducting a biopsychosocial assessment of a client. So as we do this, we need to think about like what biological factors impact your client's reality, and these may include the stage of life. So what stage of life are they living? Are they elderly? And what is their physical health condition? What illnesses do they have? And what are their socioeconomic realities? And how are those socioeconomic realities putting them at risk of acquiring different illnesses? And how does their biology influence their behavior? So if they do have an illness or physical condition, how is that impacting their social emotional well-being? Um, and you should even include whether your client has access to basic needs, including food, shelter, clothing, medical health, physical capabilities, and in a physical environment. Thank you so much for listening to this lecture. I hope you have a great week.